Hey gardening friends. So this week I've been really focused on replenishing my seed starting supplies as well as cleaning up and organizing my seed starting area. And I thought I would turn on the camera and show you what I've done so far in terms of cleaning up one of the areas that I primarily use for seed starting, but also wanted to show you a few things that I just purchased for replenishment of my seed starting supplies, as well as things that I'm going to need later in the growing season to feed and fertilize plants. So let me turn the camera around and show you. So in part one of my seed starting supplies video, I showed you a few of the products that I just purchased for potting up seedlings. Today I'm going to show you some of the product that I recently purchased for seed starting, as well as other products that I already have on hand that I'm also planning to use. So one of the products that I purchased recently for seed starting is this Jiffy seed starting mix. This is an 8-quart bag. I purchased about 6 of them. They were about $5 a bag. I always prefer to start my seedlings in seed starting mix, and that's for 3 primary reasons. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into getting a seed to germinate. The last thing that I want to happen is for them to not make it due to some sort of bacteria or fungi. So for me, it's important to start them in something that's sterile, that gives them a great chance for succeeding and growing into a nice, healthy plant. I have tried starting seedlings in potting mixes, and for me personally, I find that I have a lot more success and a lot higher rate of germination when I use seed starting mix. So that is what I use. Any type of seed starting mix, in my opinion, probably works just as well. As long as it has either cocoa coir or sphagnum peat moss and it's sterile, you should be fine using that. Now, one thing to note about this Jiffy seed starting mix is that the base medium for this is sphagnum peat moss. I believe that Burpee seed starting mix, the base medium for that is cocoa coir. So, if you have a preference for one or the other, then definitely pay attention to that when you're selecting which type of seed starting mix you want to use for sowing seeds. And then a few other products that I typically use for seed starting, in addition to the seed starting mix, are the Jiffy peat pellets. So I typically have really good success using the Jiffy peat pellets. I use them quite a bit in 2025. Actually used them to start the majority of my seedlings. What I like about them is they obviously don't take up a lot of space, so they're very easy for storage. I also like the fact that I only need to, because these are the ones where you put them in water and they expand. So I only need to activate as many as I'm going to need at a particular point in time. So if I only need 5, I only need to put 5 in water and let them expand. I don't have to get a whole batch of seed starting mix ready in order to sow only a few seeds. So that's another reason why I like to use these peat pellets. The other reason is that it just works with my seed starting setup. So I have, in terms of the types of trays that I use for setting my seedlings on the heat mats, these fit very nicely into those trays. So that's another reason why I like to use these. I didn't have to purchase any this year because I pretty much stocked up on these earlier this year in 2025. I started out with a lot more earlier in the year, but because I used probably about half of the stash that I had, this is what I'm left with. But I think that this should be enough to sustain me for 2026, in addition to the seed starting mixes that I purchased, because I purchased 6 bags of Jiffy, and I think I have a few bags of another brand that's coming in the mail. So between the 2 or 3 of those products, that should be sufficient for all of my seed starting in 2026. I have 2 different sizes. So this package here, these are the 42 millimeter pellets, and these expand, I believe, up to about 3 inches. Yeah, 42 millimeter. They expand up to about 3 inches once they've soaked up water. And then I have these smaller ones, and I believe these are 36 millimeter. So they are about 1.5 inches in height once they've fully expanded. So I will use these for my smaller seeds like petunia, pansies, things like snapdragons, the ones that have really, really tiny seeds. I will sow them in these smaller pellets. And then for my larger seeds, I'll put them in the 42 millimeter peat pellets. And then while I have you here, I wanted to show you this toolbox that I repurposed for seed sowing. Well, this is an old toolbox that my husband had been using, and he was going to throw it out. And I was like, I think I can use that, for storing, all the odds and ends and things that I use for seed starting. So right now I have a couple of things in here, like packets of seeds. So these are my Lysianthus seeds that I keep in here. I have plant labels here. I have some cable ties here. I have some random things in here. Down here I have, tape and post-it notes. This one I have some stickers. Most of these I haven't fully filled up yet, but a few of them I have other things in, like these are tools that I use for like poking holes in the dirt to plant seeds, or for pricking out seeds when I'm getting ready to pot them up. And then here I have some popsicle sticks that I use for poking holes in dirt for planting seeds. Here I have some old plant labels, which I like to reuse them where possible. And then the rest of these are empty, so to be determined in terms of what I'm going to use these for. I wanted to show you, you definitely repurpose some of the things that you might have around the house, or maybe things you find while you're out thrifting, to store some of the materials that you use for seed starting. Up here at the top I have some stickers that I've collected over the years from seed companies, and then I have just a bin here that I use to store a bunch of old labels. So yeah, I did a little bit of work this weekend trying to get this area organized. This is the table that I typically work on when I'm doing my seed starting, when I'm mixing up things, when I'm sowing seeds. This is typically where I'm working. So did some work to kind of tidy this space up. It was a mess before. It definitely looks much better. Over here I just have just a cup of other things that I use, like little tools for starting seeds. And here I just have a few bins that I use for storing seeds from my garden, either from 2025 or from the prior year. So that's what these 2 bins are. Over here I have my seed storage container. This is where I keep all of my seed packets. And then here I have a bin where I'm keeping all of the varieties of seeds that I'm planning on starting in 2026, at least all the ones that I've gone through and selected so far. So I like to keep them organized in a separate bin so that they're easily accessible, and that way I don't have to search through my seed storage box to find what I'm looking for. And then I also purchased a few other things, not necessarily for seed starting, but for fertilizing my plants once they've been transplanted out in the garden. So I like to use this time to re-up on granulated fertilizers, as well as things that I use to amend the soil in my garden beds. And a couple products I purchased. This is Plant Tone. Lift it up, it's a bit heavy. This is Espoma plant tone, and this is a granulated fertilizer that I use for my flowers, and that would include my annual flowers as well as any perennial flowers that I have in the garden. This has an NPK of 533. And then the other items that I picked up in terms of granulated fertilizer includes the Espoma garden tone. So I like to use this for fertilizing my vegetables and herbs. And this has an NPK of 344. And there's the ingredient list there. See if I can show you the ingredient list for the plant tone in case you want to see what that is comprised of. And then a few more items that I purchased for fertilizing the garden include some Espoma Biotone Starter. I typically use this when I transplant my seedlings into the garden or into planters and containers. This helps to reduce transplant shock. I've been using this for over, I don't know, probably more than 10 years now. It has particular ingredients in it that helps promote root development. If I have it on hand, I always put a little bit in the planting hole before I put the plants in there because it will help reduce transplant shock, but it also helps them develop strong roots. So definitely one that I would recommend if you've not tried it before. And then two items that I purchased more so for amending the soil to provide additional nutrition. Earthworm castings. This is by a company called Expert Gardener. I've used it several times. Have had nothing but great success using this one. I amend all of my beds and containers using this. And then I also bought some bone meal from the same company. Love to amend my beds with bone meal where necessary, as it helps with root development and it helps promote bigger blooms on your vegetables and flowers. All right, guys, so that's all I wanted to show you today. I'll be back to show you more very soon, specifically the area where I store all of my seedlings once they've been sown in the seed trays. I'll show you that area with, the grow light situation. But I still have quite a bit of work to do to get that area tidied up. So I'll come back and show you that very soon. Hope everyone's having a lovely day and stay safe. I hope to see you guys back here soon. Take care, friends.